we have quite a bit to cover, but we're going to try to make it as concise as possible so that we can all get what we need and feel like we know where we're going with it. The first thing I wanted to start with was just to say thank you for working with all of us on this for many reasons. I might invoke Larry here. He says things along the lines of when the water is, when we miss an opportunity to monitor, then that water is under the bridge. It's gone. So if I get that right, Larry, something along those lines. So, if we didn't get out there at all this year and get what information we could, those opportunities would not reoccur, because these conditions, 2020 with all its craziness, isn't going to happen again, for better or worse, whichever we want to look at it as. So, so it's wonderful to have you all be able to do this. I want to say a little bit about safety, just because we are relying on volunteers more with boats, with their own boats and so forth. And you all who have boats are experienced mariners, but on behalf of MCOA and all of our partnering organizations, ask that people wear life jackets and do all the best practices that they can think of. If you feel like something is unsafe in the course of your monitoring, please don't do it. If you have a smallish boat and you don't feel comfortable going out to the farthest site, given weather conditions or other conditions, by all means, use your judgment, and we're happy that you can do that. So if you have any concerns also or questions, let us know. Somebody else was asking earlier today about the size of their boat, and given we're encouraging people, if at all possible, to monitor with a family member or somebody in their immediate bubble of people that they're already in contact with. I feel like that's the best practices at this point, because then you don't have to worry about COVID. But if somebody has a big boat where you can be more than 6 feet away, and it seems comfortable, it's certainly better to have 2 people on the boat than 1 person. So that's the other aspect of this is, in most cases, it is not safe to have 1 person on a boat. So if it is simply not possible to have 2 people on the boat because you don't have a family member, then maybe we can find another person or family or whatever in that area to do the monitoring. And that's not to discount your services, but we just want to keep people safe. So please, we're not going to micromanage. I don't think we can't. There's too much distance and too many people involved. So we ask people just do the best they can. And if it doesn't feel good, to let us know. And by all means, we absolutely appreciate that. So any comments or questions about any of that? Okay. Well, if anything comes up, do let us know. I'm not as organized and ready for this as I thought I would be, so forgive me, but I'm going to kind of go through the agenda with folks, and then and there's a part where I need to pull up some video to show you, and different people are going to be showing slides. And for example, Celeste, did you have slides, or were you going to have me show the slides of the data sheet and so forth? Because I'm not sure I got the most recent version. You're muted. Sorry, we can't hear you, Celeste.
The most recent version came in at like 1:30. Did you get that one?
I'll look. I'm not sure.
I think we can show it if it's on a slide. I've got them as PDFs, but it'd probably be easier than sharing screen. So
okay. At any rate, there'll be a little muddling around with this. Some of this is last minute, so we ask you to bear with us. So I think I wanted to start off asking Larry to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, and what the reasoning is, and specifically how we're going to go about getting the information that we need. And then part of that is that we are going to show you some video while Larry's talking, and then I was going to have Celeste talk about some of the additional work that you're doing and the data sheets and getting information and so forth onto those. And Kathleen was going to talk about some quality control issues. Does that sound like an okay order, Larry, Celeste, and Kathleen? Okay. So Larry, you are up. Tell me when you want those videos on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't really thought this through in the context of the video, but let me just give you a little scientific overview of what we're trying to achieve given the limitations of this year. Normally every year we go out and we look for water quality, and there are lots of aspects of water quality one could look at. But the ones we focused on in the MCOA sampling project are those that are related to ocean acidification or loss of oxygen in the water column. Because of this pandemic business and the inability to get Celeste out on the boats with the sensor that measures the oxygen and the pH, we're going to have to back off of looking at those symptoms of degraded water quality. But what we can look at are the drivers or the forcers of some of these water quality problems. So what I've done is to steal a bit of a cartoon and augment it here. And I'm not sure, I'm not a Zoom lecturer, but I think what I need to hit is, I'm not quite sure the order. Share screen.
Yep.
Okay, and then I go to this thing and the trouble is the mouse is not working on this screen. What are you folks seeing?
Nothing related to your screen at this point.
Uh-huh. So let me hit the share button. There we go.
Yep, progress, good.
Okay, so if I expand this, now you should see a cartoon.
Yes.
The problem is it's the wrong cartoon. So how do I unshare the screen? I apologize for keeping you folks waiting.
You bring your cursor up to the top and there should be a green bar that says unshare.
Right, okay.
Yep.
And I want to go back a slide. I want to unplay. No, that's not what I want to do. Well, let me just see if I can talk this through from this particular slide. So I go back and share screen, share. Okay, here's a cartoon. And now you still see this cartoon with that says fuel at the top?
Yep, good.
Okay, fine. So here's a cartoon of an estuary in which we have sunlight coming from above. We have some nutrients called nitrogen and phosphorus coming from outside the estuary. Usually they come in on the rivers or from the shore banks. And they are used in the top part of this estuary, the very shallow waters, to make algae. Those algae tend to settle down. And as they settle down, somebody starts to eat them up and to respire them. As somebody respires them, in Anglo-Saxon, we would say burn them up. You consume oxygen and you produce carbon dioxide, and that lowers the pH. So normally a lot of the degraded water quality that we look for is to be found in the deeper waters of these estuaries. That's the fire that is fueled by these nutrients that come into the surface waters. So this year we're unable to sample in the deep waters. We're unable to look at the places where the fire is occurring and where these symptoms are most likely to be found. But what we can do is look at the amount of fuel up in the top part of the water column, because that's something you can sample directly from the boats without taking these sondes out that are going to measure oxygen or pH in the deeper water. So this is we often see a pretty good correlation between fire in the deeper waters and the fuel that comes in and is found in the surface waters. We see variations among the different estuaries, and that's the genius of the MCOA program, to let us look at all these different estuaries at one time. So we're going to work off of the basis of these correlations from previous years and say where there's fuel, there's likely to be fire. We won't be able to demonstrate fire, but at least we'll have a record of how much fuel came into these different systems in the year 2020. And the year 2020 is going to be an odd year, probably, because there are a lot fewer people along the coast of Maine, lower tourist traffic, and everybody's sitting tight and so forth. So will we see that in the fuel? I don't know. We won't have an opportunity to look for the fire, as I said, but at least we'll have something to talk about in future years. So let me stop there on that cartoon. The work you're doing is really important in giving us some kind of record of what happened in these estuaries. Let me re-emphasize what Sarah said about safety. This work is very, very important, but it is not nearly as important as risking anyone's skin or life. It's just not that important. So do your best to get representative samples out in the estuaries, samples that represent what the bulk of the estuary is seeing for fuel. That's being representative, but not at the cost of safety. And if you think that you're being non-representative in any way, if a bird pooped into your sample, whatever, document it. That's the third leg of this triad. Safe, representative, and document. Write down if you think you have a sample that's representative, or if there's any reason to think that it's got a problem. You sneezed, you dropped a peanut butter sandwich nearby, whatever it might be. So Sarah, do you want to you're going to put the spoken version of the video?
I am. Unfortunately, I didn't label them as I should have done. And so I'm going to guess which is the right video, and then I'm going to share it with you and see what happens. So let me see if I can do that.
Sarah's going to make all of these points, and I'm going to keep shut up unless something occurs to me.
So I made these videos of how you're going to take your water sample, your bottle sample, one of the videos, some of the videos are no talking and some of them are talking. So let me make sure, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the right one or not here. Okay, that's not the right one. This is the right one. Try not to laugh too hard. You actually can say anything you want about this afterwards. All right, it might take a minute to load, I'm sorry.
If you laugh, mute yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, come on. All right.
Sarah,
Yes,
while it's loading,
yes.
can you explain to us why we can't do depth sampling?
Oops, hang on a second, let me adjust something. Why you can't do depth sampling?
I'm sure.
You mean taking a bottle sample from the deep water? Is that what you're specifically, or you mean profiles with the sonde?
Using the sonde.
So that's a good question. So what we're going to do is the groups that have a sonde and have people trained to read the sonde and use the sonde, by all means, use your sonde at your sites if you would like to, if it makes sense. It makes sense to us for sure. We just, not all the groups have that capacity. And the same with the Secchi disc. So we didn't really feel like we had the capacity to make sure everybody could access the Secchi disc at this point and get training on how to use it and so forth. But for groups who have the Secchi disc, by all means, take that reading if you can. And we will find ways, if at all possible, to keep that data together. I'm sorry, but this is not loading quickly at all. I thought if me being in the office where we have better internet, it would be quick and easy.
So while it's loading, can I have a follow-on question?
Yes, does that answer your question?
Not yet. Celeste has a sonde. Is it possible to borrow a sonde?
So Celeste has, do you have two sondes right now, Celeste? Yeah, we had not talked about that. So let me get back to you about that.
Thank you.
It's a good question. I
decision
sus-
to go out into the bay and do 6 places and to do such limited testing if we can do the big testing.
Yeah, keeping in mind that there's calibration that's needed and training required to, I don't know if the necessary people would know how to use this particular sonde. So there would be training potentially required as well. So let me get back to you about that.
Thank you.
Why don't you just tell us what's in the video?
Well, I could do that. I could even demonstrate, but it's much better if I can do this. Let's see. Let me,
We could read through the procedures that are written out.
yeah, we certainly can. We certainly can. Let me try something. Let me just stop it and try again here.
I'm not hearing that.
There's no sound, Sarah,
Oh,
but we can see it.
hang on. Okay, so I just learned there's no sound for some reason, and I don't know why that is. So, Larry, do you want me to talk, or do you want to talk through this?
Why don't you do the talking, because you know how you're transitioning from one
Okay.
thing.
Okay. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know why that would be the case. But at any rate, I just introduced myself in the video. I'm putting on gloves. I have a bag of bottles that are marked clean from the lab. And you will have a similar bag of bottles. You'll notice this particular bag has a big hole in it. That's not the way your bag should look. You'll also notice as we go through the other video that my gloves were reused, and you should not reuse your gloves. So at any rate, here I am putting on my gloves, and I'm saying that I'm moving away from the motor. Don't want to get debris from the motor. Wanting to keep the sample clean so there's nothing getting into the sample. It should be sterile. So this is a labeled bottle. And now I'm going to do 3 rinses of this bottle in the water. No fingers in the lid, in the bottle, or on the threads of the bottle. Rinse the bottle 3 times. Rinse the lid 3 times. And really, I shouldn't be rinsing it in the same water. Water is going to pass by me so that I'm not taking a sample in the water that I just rinsed, not touching the inside of the bottle. Don't get the surface of the water, plunge it underneath, bring it up, pour it off, cap it tightly.
If I could just interject real quickly, you notice the water's coming toward you. You're always trying to get fresh water. So get yourself on a part of the boat that is seeing water that has not washed over the boat or washed over something else that might be dirty.
Okay, any questions right off the bat about what you saw or how that works?
So you've got air in the bottle, that's okay, right?
Yep, you only want to fill the bottle to the shoulder. It's going to get frozen, and so we don't want anything bursting. And in fact, right after you take the sample, it should go in a cooler. So we'll talk about that again in a minute. But
Oftentimes it's not flat calm, and the surface is rough around the around the boat. And so with that, we would just try to get fairly deep as we wash it and then sample it. Is that correct?
You don't really need to go any deeper than the glove allows you, because then your skin is going to be exposed to the water. So if you can get that bottle below the surface of the water itself, you're doing fine.
Great.
And if you, when you go ahead and plunge the bottle in, you want to plunge it so that you're not getting the surface. So here I am rinsing the bottles, but then 3 times, letting the water pass by. And then when you plunge the bottle in, plunge it upside down. Okay. So, you know, like Larry was saying, I mean, all this is about a sample that's only having in it what environmental stuff you want, and not saliva from your talking, not debris from boat engine, not your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that sort of thing. So, Kathleen, do you want to add anything to that whole part of the discussion, or Celeste?
No, I think you're doing a great job. I guess what if people are in a situation where it's dangerous to lean out over the side of the boat?
Funny you should ask, because I happen to have a video showing bucket sampling. I think it's this one. I don't know if this will work, but let's try it. Here we go. Oh no, okay, this is the silent one. This is actually funny. Okay, 3 rinses of the bucket. Try not to let it slip out of your hands. Don't put your fingers in the bucket.
Wear gloves.
And wear gloves, although I didn't wear gloves for this part. I wore gloves because I was handling the outside of the bucket. So is that correct, Larry?
Again, you're just trying to keep your body away from that sample.
Right. So what I did was I took the bucket sample, not putting my fingers in the bucket, and then I put my gloves on. And now you'll see me fight with my gloves, because I did what you're not supposed to do, because I thought, oh, well, I'm just making videos. You know, I could reuse my gloves. But the reality is the gloves get wet and they're a pain in the neck to try to get on and off. So, and then you can see it's ripped. Don't use ripped gloves. You should have a set of gloves for every sample. And so Celeste is preparing kits for everybody, and they will have things like gloves for everybody. So this is exactly what you should not have to deal with. But then you'll have, again, clean bottles that are labeled, and the labels on them will be provided by Celeste. This is a different label than what you will see, because this is a different system, but look, I didn't even get my skin in the water, even though I had a big rip. And then I put it in the cooler. Okay. No, it's in the cooler.
Sarah, this is Kathleen.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add that when you should still rinse the bottles 3 times, even if you're
in the bucket.
in the bucket. Yep.
Okay.
And you discard overboard, and you can use that discard water to rinse the lid off too. I like to rinse the lids.
Okay. All right. I guess I have a question about that. I mean, if you're rinsing into the bucket.
Out. Overboard.
Yeah, you would dump
course.
the water out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't use the bucket, I guess, so haven't had a reason to do that. Gotcha.
So I have a question. After we get the gloves on, should we rinse our hands in the water first before we start handling the bottle and stuff? Because we may have touched the outsides of the gloves.
Yeah, you're trying not to, and you shouldn't have to touch the outside of the glove if it's a clean, dry glove.
Use your judgment, because the glove is like a mask. It's not there to protect you, it's to protect the sample. So if you've touched anything that might contaminate the sample, then yes, rinse it. You've got a whole ocean of rinse water out there.
Great.
And it's really hard to get gloves on when your hands are wet. So being able to dry them off might help too.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point, because I know, like, if it's a misty day, that can make it difficult. Just the mist in the air can make it hard. So that's good. Good discussion point. All right. Thank you for bearing with me with my videos. I'll improve them, but there we are. Okay. Any other questions about the bottle sampling or the bucket sampling?
So the bottles are labeled per site.
They are, and so when you're out there, you're going to have to pay attention that you're getting the bottle matched with the site, so that you're not putting, because otherwise what will happen is those, when they get to the lab, we'll assume that they're correctly labeled, and if they're not. So if something happened, then you need to either make a note on the data sheet. I think that's the best thing, is to make a note on the data sheet that you used bottle 5 for the site number 1 or something like that. So that would draw our attention to that on the data sheet. If something, that could happen, but we'll try to match them up.
Sarah, do you have a separate section on documentation?
In terms of how to fill out the data sheet?
Yeah, I don't remember. Any comments about accidentally got the prop wash in on the rinse? Or things like that?
There is a comment section. It doesn't make suggestions along those lines, but we can go over that. In fact, right now, what a good segue.
It does now. That's the 131.
Okay.
I've got a suggestion to write anything that comes up, any complications, any question of contamination, anything you see in the water that looks unusual, fish kills, film in the water. And I suggest using the whole comment section and using the back of the sheet if you need to, so that, and taking pictures if people see something they think is odd near where they're sampling too. That doesn't hurt to have that kind of.
It's also useful to have positive comments.
Yeah.
Good clean sample, something like that.
Happy seals.
Okay.
I used to write dolphins. Oh, I saw a dolphin, I have porpoises, on my data sheet.
That's great. All right. I think I got the right data sheet here, Celeste. So let me try sharing that with you now.
If you want to share my screen too, or I've got it up.
I think you can, but here, is this it?
Yep, that looks about it.
Okay, there it is. So here's your data sheet. And I think Celeste should talk you through, she made it for us. Thank you, Celeste. And if you want to just talk us through it, Celeste, that would be a good start.
Sure. Some of you have already seen this form in a different format for the SOND as well, but date, location, which is your estuary, nearest high tide, if you can look that up on a form. It may also already have been part of our planning purposes of when the nearest high tide is. Your name under volunteers. Basically, the weather is, that's subjective, and so you can write what you have noticed in your area in the last 24 hours and the number of days with similar weather. This is slightly based on Friends of Casco Bay's observation, like data collection form that they use. In the next section, so that could be filled out before you even go out if you want, or you can fill it out at the first station, but that really only has to be filled out once. The next section is to be filled out at each site, and there'll be the site designation, and I'll make sure that's written on the bottles, and then hopefully get a list so that people have a list and a basic verbal description of where they are. So you write the site designation, the time on station in 24-hour time, estimate the wind direction, estimate the wind speed, the weather, the water surface. Some people have a Secchi disc and some people don't. And the ones that do already know how to do that. And so we usually do that to the nearest 1/10 of a meter. We estimate that to the nearest 10th. The water temperature, we're making sure, hopefully in the kit, there will be one of two kinds of thermometers, a more of a traditional stick thermometer, and one, there's also some probes with a digital readout, battery powered. I don't know if we're going to go through the process of taking the temperature, but you should hopefully be out of the sun. If you're leaning over the edge, it's the same side you would do a Secchi reading on, the shady side. Hold it in there until it's stable and read the thermometer to the nearest 0.1 centimeter. And then the digital thermometer can also be put into, the probe end can be put into the water, but not the digital part, not the LCD screen. You can also use the buckets. So you would keep it in the center of the bucket off the bottom while you measure temperature. And then under water sample taken, that's basically just to say, yes, I have, or no, it wasn't taken. Any notes that need to be written about that would be in the observations section or on the back. Fill the page up if you need to with as much information as you think might be important. The duplicates, I think we'll, I don't know, are we gonna cover that? There's only 1 or 2 duplicates per volunteer over the whole season, and it's to really just randomly decide, oh, today at this station I'm going to take 2 samples, and that's so that Kathleen can get that information in the lab, and I can cover that more closely with people when I drop off their kits. So
Actually, Celeste, I'm going to say a little bit about the duplicates.
okay,
Yeah, a little later on.
so that's the data collection form. So we've talked about collecting the water sample. Hopefully everybody has a cooler with an ice pack they can take out. And that's the one thing that we're not providing, because we're hoping that people have those.
If anyone needs a cooler, just get in touch with me because we have plenty here at the Darling Center.
How much ice do you want in it? Do you want to be able to freeze the things? Or?
An ice pack is fine. And then somebody, probably I, will be collecting them from you in your area right when you're done, so that they can be put into a freezer as soon as possible or taken to the Darling Center as soon as possible.
I had a question. This is Sid. Sometimes when you're working out of a boat, odd things happen. Would it be a good idea to include an extra unlabeled bottle?
There will be that.
In case it drops or blows and it's not clean and you want to use a different one.
There will be.
I don't know what you're talking about, Sid. Nothing unexpected ever happens out there. Thank you, Celeste, for adding those extra bottles in, and for Kathleen.
So,
Celeste, do you want to talk? And I don't know, Larry may want to add something in about taking the temperature. How things about that.
If you don't use a thermometer over the side, but instead use a bucket, try to get a lot of water in the bucket and measure it quickly, because the less water you have, the faster the temperature can change. And obviously the longer you wait, the more the temperature can change. So you're trying to get a representative temperature. So if it's a rough day and you don't want to hang over the side with a thermometer, certainly use a bucket, but fill up the bucket and take the temperature immediately.
And it's the kind of thing that you might end up making a comment about if, 20 minutes later you realized that you got distracted because of conditions and you may have been slow to take the temperature. Then just put that down in the observations or comments section that, the temperature taking out of the bucket wasn't as quick as you had intended or something like that.
So my boat, this is Paula, boat instrumentation gives me water temperature. Would you like me to record that also to see if there's a difference, or just use your thermometer?
We are going to check the thermometers against each other at some point. So my feeling is if you want to do it from your boat as well, then put that in there and just label it as such. That's great.
Yeah, put that in the observation section. That would be good to know. That, I mean, for future years too. So
I
Yeah.
have one more question. How long, how much time does it usually take for the temperature to sort of stabilize with the
That-
thermometer?
That's a good question.
So the Friends of Casco Bay documentation suggests you can let it stabilize for up to 3 minutes. I think that's too long if your bucket is sitting in the sun. It's also suggested that you try to keep the bucket in the shade, but that's not always possible when the sun is right overhead. I've got to, the two kinds of thermometers we have, I still need to test them a little bit. I believe that the digital ones are going to be very quick. They're supposed to be. And I don't know, Sarah, the ones that you're giving us to use, do you
Yeah.
know about those, how long they take?
I feel like it was 2 or 3 minutes in the past, but I have not used them for a long time, so I don't know.
Okay, well, I will test that, but
We'll get back
Okay.
to you on that.
yeah.
Maybe that's something that we add into the procedure, Celeste. Or maybe even we put it right
There.
as a note. Yeah. At the bottom of the data sheet or something like that, allow it to calibrate for 2 minutes or whatever.
I think there is that in the procedures, was there?
I'll double check, but yeah. Any other questions about the data sheet before I drop that off the screen? Okay, I'm going to pull up the procedure. You all will get a version of this. Oops. Sorry, hang on. You all will get a version of the procedure, which is, what we've been talking about in terms of the bucket sample, taking the temperature, and she has put in the psychic depth reading stuff in here too. So we need to finalize this, things like how long it takes to get the thermometers to a point where you should read them. So we're going to hold off sending this to you until we have it finalized, but we will have this in your kit. How does that sound so far?
Yep.
Great.
Let me just say that if you're going to use the boat to do a temperature, it would be a good idea to get 3 or 4 calibrations between a thermometer and your boat thermometer, so that we're sure that they're on the same page.
Okay.
You can do that over the season.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure if that was clear from the earlier discussion.
Right. Kathleen. Let's see.
Yes.
Hello. Would you like to talk now about the quality control measures that you were
Sure.
ready to share?
Do you have a slide of our chain of custody form?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, because I can just bring it up on the screen if it's easier.
Nope, I got it right here.
Okay. So for the total nitrogen samples, because they're coming into the lab, we track where the samples were taken, and that's kind of hard to see, but
Oh, let me bring it up. Sorry.
there we go. So it's very similar to Celeste's, and I can see that some of the, it looks like it's double on the top, but I'll fix that. But the important thing is that we, since Celeste's sheet already records the samplers' names, we don't want to make you fill out these forms over and over again. But we do want to, so for this part, you can kind of staple this form to Celeste's form, I guess. And we can copy some of the information. But we do need the time and date. This looks very strange. I tell you what, I'll just share my screen.
Well, and Kathleen, I think, and Celeste can help me here, not everyone will be doing this, because if Celeste is transporting the samples, she will be doing the chain of custody.
Well, the chain of custody should start when the samples are taken.
Okay, so you're gonna have them started on, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So, but I'm not sure why this looks so weird. So could I just share my screen maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, so
Would it be-
let me blow this up a little bit.
Kathleen, would it be possible to add a chain of custody, like the information that people would need to fill out right to the bottom of Celeste's form, so it's all on one page and keep track of?
That's a lot to, it's kind of a lot to put on one piece of paper, but we could look at that. So I've already filled out, you know, the project name, Celeste's name, but what we need here is just the person that collected the sample, and they're handing the sample off to Celeste. And then for each sample, we need a date and time of collection. Preservation, you can just put cooler, it's in the cooler, and maybe this is a good opportunity to just double check that you've got the cooler and you've got the ice pack. If you forgot the ice pack, then make a note that you forgot it. Every container will have a volume. It's not super important that you put that on there. For some samples it is, but not for these. And then over here, this is what I'm going to check off when it finally gets to the lab and I get it from Celeste, just to double check that I have enough sample to actually analyze it and that everything's still in good condition, the bottle didn't leak, whatever. And this bottle batch code is really important. And this year we've started better tracking our batches of bottles that we clean. A lot of labs just use disposable bottles, but I'm appalled by that. So we re-clean ours to avoid a lot of plastic waste. But we really want to track those batches in case, you know, one day they didn't get rinsed quite as well, or our intern wanted to leave early and didn't do the 10 rinses they're supposed to do. So every bag of bottles will have a bottle code written on it. So if you could please just fill that in. And for, if you use the same batch for all of them, just put an arrow down, you know, fill in the first one, put an arrow down, you know, these were used for the whole thing. Same with the date, just, you know, or quotes, whatever. You don't have to repeatedly fill in the same data. And I've got another little slide here to kind of show you a few things here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the bottle batches. But when we're talking about duplicate samples, a lot of times people wonder, well, why are we really doing that? And if you look at this is somebody shooting arrows. And if we look at the upper left, you know, that's probably just a beginner, right? Somebody's not very precise. They're all over the place. You know, the lower left, a little bit better. And then the lower right, they're right on track and doing well. So we want to decide, we want to find out where you're at in that continuum. Not to say that, you know, if you have more variability in your sampling, there's something wrong with you, but we need to characterize that. So say these are your duplicates and they say the upper right, those are pretty close. So if your two duplicates come out pretty close, then we can probably reasonably assume that you're not the person whose sampling is all over the place. Like the person shooting the arrows was all over the place. And if it's the upper left, you know, there's a little bit more variability. Again, when you're not the person that your sampling is so tight that they're all clustered right together, or that they're all over the place. So we can, by looking at your duplicate samples, we can get a pretty good idea of how well your sampling is going. And sometimes, you know, if you see variability in your duplicates, don't get worried, because sometimes that is just the nature of the site you're sampling. If you're someplace where the water moving by is being disturbed or whatever, that can happen. So if it happens to you once, don't worry about it. But we want to, I'm just going to escape out of this. We want to get an idea, you know, what your sampling is like. And we want to do a couple of duplicates per team, and if you have more than one person actually collecting the bottle samples, it would be good to have one person do one replicate and then have the other do the other replicate. So this, can you all see this graph okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this graph is the left y-axis on the left is your total nitrogen values. And this is kind of an imaginary estuary starting at the head, where you usually have more nitrogen due to, you know, human impact, and then going down. So you've got station 1 through 7. And for each of these, we've done 2 of those bottle blanks. And what I do for every batch of bottles, I save 2 out. And in the lab, we put really clean water in them, and then we run them just like a sample. So this first set, the 2 blanks in the mean, very low. So we know that most of the signal we're seeing in our samples is actually from the samples and not from dirty bottles or whatnot. Here is a situation where we have a batch of bottles that had a high blank signal. Well, if we have a couple of blanks and we can characterize that blank signal, and it's pretty
Consistent.
Consistent, yes, thank you. Then we can subtract that. But it's really important to know that, because if we didn't have these blanks, then we would think all of this signal was sample, when in actual, you know, reality, it would just be this part that's from the sample. So for every batch that we clean, we have a set of blanks that goes with it. And that's why it's important to record that bottle batch number. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to say a little bit more about the duplicates. So if you were to, this is the same data we were just looking at, only in this case, the 2 orange ones are the two replicates of station 1. And they're pretty close. One, 0.345, and what's that one? For some reason, I can't see it. 0.360 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, pretty close. This is the mean in red. So if we calculate an error for that, which is just taking the mean and then taking the average difference from the mean of our 2 samples in a percentage, this, what you're looking at, is about a 2% error. So if you run your duplicates and we do this calculation from your data and you have a 2% error, then we know that all of your data here is within 2% of, you know, an actual value. Your error is 2%, which is great. And even if your samples are a little more variable, and we calculate this error at 13%, we can still use this data. We just know that we have to say, you know, we have to have the caveat that, oh, we can use this data plus or minus 13%. But that's still really useful, because if you're comparing 1 milligram per liter of nitrogen to, you know, 0.08, 13% of each one of those isn't, you know, doesn't qualitatively change the information. So these quality control things that we do, the blanks and the duplicates, are really, really important. And again, don't feel like, you know, it's it's anything to be nervous about if you have higher variability. We just want to characterize it. And as far as quality control, I'll just say a couple of other things. One is if you're calibrating, if you do have sondes and you're calibrating your sondes, we usually do a cross calibration at the beginning of the season, and we're not able to do that this year. So if you could write down every little iota of information about your calibrations, we're going to try to do a post-season calibration of the thermometers and any sondes that people are using. But it would be important to know that, you know, what solutions you used, what the lot numbers were, what, you know, what was the expiration date, that kind of thing. And if that way, after the fact, if there are any differences, we can try to sleuth out what happened. And it's good to have that information anyway, but in this case, it will be really important because we're not doing that pre-season cross calibration. And I think that's, I will just bring up one more thing and then just hand it over to Celeste to answer the question. But we need to make sure that we know the lot number of all of the thermometers, like which group has which one. And Celeste will tell you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing.
I will have to write it down and when I send the kits out.
So if somebody is using a thermometer and it breaks, you know, the one Celeste gives you breaks and you grab another one, please just write down all the information that you can about it and we'll calibrate it along with the rest of them at the end of the season. I think that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Kathleen at this point?
Yes.
Yep. John.
This may seem silly, but I'm trying to figure out why the differences would occur between two duplicate samples. One would be that your water stream had some change in it during the time between your two sampling times, and the other would be some form of operator error, whether it's dropping your peanut butter sandwich there or not.
Right.
How can you tell the difference? I mean, I'm assuming there would be changes in the water stream periodically.
Yes, there are changes in, I've taken replicate samples at the Darling Center and, well, several other estuaries, different places. And they, I mean, a 2 to 5% error could be pretty normal depending on the situation. And any environmental sampling, you're going to have error just because of the nature of an estuary. You know, you might have, you know, a few more phytoplankton in one sample or, you know, it's a copepod that's going to excrete into your sample but before it gets frozen, or, you know, they're just environmental factors.
Why is it characterized as error?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
So why is it characterized as error? If in fact it's an actual variability between.
Well, the thing is we don't know, right? So if you take a sample, if you take two samples and, you know, 2% of it is just the variability and 3% or 5% is because you sneezed into it, we really have no way of figuring that out, particularly with just two replicate samples. But we call it error, and probably that's a harsh term, but we could call it variability. That's what we could call it. We could say variability. So these samples are this variable, and we can assume that probably the other samples are that variable. But when you do I mean, ideally we do replicates at every station, right? So if there are differences between stations, we would know. Like if the variability was different between stations, we would be able to catch that, but we have to balance it with economic and time, constraints. So what I would encourage you to do is not do your replicates, your 2 sets of replicates. You want to do them on different days. If you have different samplers, you want the different people to sample, and you also want to do them at different stations. And that way we do the best we can. And it's a constant struggle with research to balance what is ideal with what we can afford and what we have time to do. And we think this is a pretty good compromise.
Great. Thank you very much. Celeste, do you want to, I think now is probably not the time to talk about the transportation component of how we're going to get samples from each of you at the end of your trek out there to Celeste or to the lab. So Celeste, is it okay if we do that by email with each group?
Yeah, I'll need to talk to everyone separately because
I feel like it's
everyone has different circumstances, and but we do need another. So on the chain of custody form, there needs to be more than one place for transfer because that may happen too.
There's a second page that, oh, you mean between
like received by, relinquished by, there it might happen more than once or twice. You know what I mean?
So
okay.
like select, yeah, okay.
There's a second page to that for more of those. I just didn't include it in the talk, but yes, we can definitely do that.
On the top because we don't want another page. I don't think. But
yeah, I think we can probably shorten the sample list on that page and just put it all on the same page. So I can do that.
Okay.
Have you said anything about self-defrosting freezers?
Yep.
Okay, good.
So I'm looking who's here. I think there's only one person here that has suggested they might actually keep the samples to freeze them. Otherwise, so far, I'll hopefully be picking them up, but I need to talk to people individually. It's, for instance, it might be easier if somebody does have a non-self-defrosting freezer to put them in. That's basically a good, you can store them there as long as they get moved directly from there to the Darling Center over the season. But I have to talk to people about that.
I feel like there's a lot of bits and pieces of that Celeste will have to converse with each person and find out what's going to work best. So.
Yep, and I would just add that the sooner you can get them to the Darling Center, the better, because we have a queue and we really can't put people at the beginning of the line. So we'd like to have max a couple of months in the freezer. And if I don't get them until a month has already gone by and you're put in the queue, it might put you beyond that date. So, I'm here a lot now at the Darling Center. So, any week I can probably make arrangements to pick, receive samples. So the sooner the better.
Do what we can.
Great. Any last questions that have occurred to people? Thank you.
I have one, and I assume, Celeste, that you will talk with me about where I'm going to sample, whether it's the St. George River or the Westgate.
Yes. As far as dates and transportation, that's kind of something I need to talk to people about, but also for you, it's location. I'm having trouble getting a hold of Annette. So give me another day to reach out to her again, because I was hoping she might have some ideas. Are you willing to do the West gig too?
Yeah, I haven't done the Westgate, but it's no problem.
Okay.
And
right.
As long as you give me GPS coordinates.
Okay. Well,
it's super unlike Annette. She's always like super responsive, it seems like. So
I talked to Annette this morning about this.
Oh.
And well, we're good friends, and I will. We can work that out with her.
Okay.
The other question I had was, if we do duplicate samples, what are we doing on the estuaries? Are we doing it in the first hour after high tide? What are we doing in general?
That's how we usually did it. We used to take a lot longer, so it would span further into the tide coming out. But I think we should aim for being out at the mouth of the estuaries around the high tide.
And
So I'm looking for daytime high tides.
As we take the sample, do you want us to have a longitude, latitude of where we took the sample?
We should have that already. We do have that already for all of the sites.
Right.
Like on the St. George, those are all nav buoys.
Right.
Most
Yeah.
of them.
Okay. And we'll talk about that.
Great. Anything else?
Sarah, this has been great.
Well, thank you to Larry, and a ton of work by Kathleen, and probably an equal ton of work by Celeste. It's been a lot of just sort of quick turnaround, because we weren't sure how we were going to do this, and then we decided how we were going to do this, but it's a lot of new pieces. So it's and thank you all of you for being so flexible and willing to just give this a shot and see what we can learn from it, because it's going to be super interesting, and it won't have some of the information, but in other ways it's going to be equally interesting, I think. So I'm very excited for it, and I really appreciate everybody's effort.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys really got back in touch quickly, especially you all. And there's a few other volunteers that weren't able to make it, and some of them actually sample in the same areas. I'm glad that David and Susie and Paula got to meet each other, because they sample in the same area. And there's other people that sample up on the St. George and the Westgate that aren't here too, and the Madomic. So it's a great group from Belfast to the Kennebec. So.
And to that end, we've talked briefly as a small advisory group about the idea that we would have some kind of Zoom meeting at the end of the season. I'm not sure when it would be. Maybe it would be more in the middle of the winter, to show off what we learned, and to at least be able to connect via Zoom. So bear with us for figuring all this out, and we hope to have something interesting to share with you this winter in the way of data and information. So that would be great, and it would be great to see you all and all the others who couldn't join us right now. Well, I think I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, and certainly Celeste and other people will be in touch with you as needed.
And feel free to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do feel free to reach out to any of us.